It is not unprecedented for U.S. presidents and Canadian prime ministers to be at odds, even to dislike one another. But the vitriol that spewed forth this week from Donald Trump came as a shock that's still reverberating. On the heels of new tariffs and serious gridlock on NAFTA, it's beginning to feel like a very different relationship than it has been in a long, long time. Joining us now for his view in Chicago, Illinois, Bruce Heyman. He is the former U.S. ambassador to Canada under President Obama. He now heads up a cross-border collaboration he co-founded called Uncharted. Mr. Ambassador, it's good to have you back on the program. How are you doing?
Good. I'm doing quite well, thank you. Good
Excellent.
to be back.
I want to just set up our little conversation here with a minor little exchange you may have heard about, the Prime Minister of Canada and somebody by the name of Peter Navarro. Here we go. Sheldon, roll the clip.
It would be with regret, but it would be with absolute certainty and firmness that we move forward with retaliatory measures on July 1st, applying equivalent tariffs to the ones that the Americans have unjustly applied to us.
Chris, there's a special place in hell for any foreign leader that engages in bad faith diplomacy with President Donald J. Trump and then tries to stab him in the back on the way out the door. And that's what bad faith Justin Trudeau did with that stunt press conference.
That comment took Bruce Heyman to Twitter, and he tweeted as follows. Today, as the former U.S. ambassador to Canada, I am calling on Peter Navarro to formally and publicly apologize to Justin Trudeau and, more importantly, the Canadian people for his insulting and inappropriate remarks on Fox News Sunday. Ambassador, I guess my first question is, what do you think Peter Navarro was thinking when he made those comments?
I think he was just carrying water for the president. I think that, you know, very much it seemed to me that the entire event was a staged event and feigned, distaste for the prime minister. I think it was staged, and I think that he definitely owed the apology.
How pleased were you to hear that he did eventually come forward and offer an apology?
It's not about being pleased or not. I think, he did the right thing, and he, in apologizing, he did the wrong thing in making those comments. But more importantly, we're on a difficult path right now between our two countries. And I spent a number of years really working hard at trying every day to enhance the U.S.-Canada relationship and feel that we're going in a difficult direction right now. So I've taken it on as a personal mission to do whatever I can to bring back the peace. And, we use the word war. I've never thought we'd ever use that word with Canada. And even though it's a trade war, trade is just as important as just about anything else when it comes to our two countries. And so I would like, as a citizen, ambassador citizen, to take that role and continue to advocate for our two countries together in a peaceful coexistence and working to do things and great things together as we have for so many years.
Well, one of the president's top economic advisors is a guy named Larry Kudlow, who made news in two ways this past week. Number one, by having a heart attack. And number two, by going on television and saying some other things. Let's hear some of that. Sheldon, go for it.
POTUS is not going to let a Canadian prime minister push him, POTUS, around President Trump on the eve of this. He is not going to permit any show of weakness on the trip to negotiate with North Korea, nor should he.
So this was about North Korea?
Of course it was, in large part.
So because Trudeau said that as Trump was going to Singapore.
Well, one thing leads to another.
Oh, I see. Okay.
They are all related. We had done our work in Quebec, north of Quebec. We did our work. We worked with the Western Alliance, pleased to do so. We get on the plane, and then this guy, Trudeau, starts blasting us.
So what's key here?
Kim must not see American weakness.
Okay, just an update. Kudlow's fine. Mild heart attack, but he's okay. But I'd like your take on Kudlow's position that this is really all about the president trying to look tough before his summit with the North Korean leader, as opposed to really being ticked off at Justin Trudeau.
Okay, do me a favor. Let's just go back a couple of weeks. And it's only been a couple of weeks, but it feels like eternity for those of us watching this. So it was June the 1st, and the president and his team made the decision to not exempt our allies from the steel and aluminum tariffs that he was putting in place. He did that, and the team did that, knowing full well they were coming to the G7 meeting with our allies, and as opposed to holding off and having that discussion with our allies, he purposefully did this in advance of. Then, as we move closer to the date, of course, a lot of the allies shocked over this, but said, we're going to have to respond and retaliate. And the White House, I think sat there and pretended to be shocked by that. I think it had to be anticipated. And then the president on Friday morning delays his departure, keeps people waiting, kept Macron, missed that meeting. But before he gets on the flight, he comes out and he says, hey, let's add Russia into the mix. Now, that's a no-go zone for the G7. The Russians not only doing what they did in Crimea and taking it over, the shooting down the passenger aircraft, poisoning people in the UK, interfering with our elections. This is completely ridiculous. But they knew it was ridiculous. Then he comes to the meeting. He doesn't contribute funding for the women's and girls effort, which was the consolidated statement and really one of the keynote issues that were, support issues that came out of the conference. And then walks in late to the meeting, which was completely inappropriate. Then he calls a press conference which was not scheduled. And in the press conference that was not scheduled, he talks about sunset provisions, which he also knows was a no-go zone, a red line for our NAFTA partners. He says, they'll absolutely be in there. And then he jumps on a plane. And my view is the president could have come out, the prime minister could have come out and just said thank you to everybody for coming. And I think that they would have sent that tweet out and been upset because I think it was staged. And the part that was missed in some of the comments that you played for everybody was the part that Navarro referred to the joint statement as some socialist statement, which demonstrated the distaste for the statement, even though they collaborated and worked on it for some long period of time. So now that I've laid all this out, and you asked me what Larry Kudlow, my thoughts were, well, look, I think he was just part of the whole stage setting here that took place over these 2 weeks, and he was just one actor in that. I think Navarro went a little too far, and even knowing that this whole thing was most likely staged, I think Navarro, crossed the line in a significant way.
Well, now that the summit is over,
that's what we're dealing with.
Okay, now that the summit is over,
Yeah.
do you think it opens up a window to Canada and the U.S., repairing whatever needs to be repaired?
Well, there's always a window for that. That's what we work on, and this will get repaired at some point. My fear is it gets escalated before it gets repaired. Given the president's actions and given what he's doing with our allies around the world, I think that Canada has said multiple times now. The foreign minister has said it. The prime minister has said it, that the retaliation will take place on July the 1st unless there is an exclusion on steel and aluminum for Canada, and it doesn't look like the president's going down that path. So the real question is then, after you implement your retaliatory measures, what then does the White House do? Are they willing to hit the pause button, or does he get all upset again and escalate this one step further? My concern is the latter, obviously.
Right. I don't know if you know Jen Gerson, but she's a writer from Western Canada who, she's got a sharp pen, let's put it that way. Let me read a little excerpt from something she recently wrote, which is, If a nation of millions can have a collective character, then it is true what is said about Canadians. We are a stoic, rule-abiding, and polite people. We are also smug, passive-aggressive, and proud. If you like your maple syrup laced with piss, we will deliver cans of the stuff, painted with quaint winter scenes and sold at a markup with a smile. Trump may be a polarizing figure in the U.S., but he is turning out to be a great unifier of Canadians. Many of Canada's most rabidly anti-Trudeau conservatives are striking a sympathetic tone with the Prime Minister. Former Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper even showed up on Fox News to talk trade in support of Trudeau. We also saw, and you may have referenced it in your last answer there, Ambassador, Chrystia Freeland, our Foreign Affairs Minister, called out U.S. protectionism by saying, quote, "No one nation's preeminence is eternal." She said that in Washington on Wednesday. In your view, does that live up to our passive-aggressive label that Jen Gerson put in her piece?
I don't know if it's passive-aggressive. You know, I know I was working with the U.S. military while ambassador, and they said to me on an ongoing basis, you know, if I was ever in a foxhole in trouble, I'd sure want a Canadian in there with me. And I remember that always. You know, it strikes me as I wouldn't want to be against a Canadian if a Canadian was upset. One of the most disturbing things is that we are raising the dialogue and the emotions against the United States right now. And the problem is that most of the United States loves Canada. In fact, virtually all the United States loves Canada. But the president and his team who represent our country right now are taking a tack that is causing, you know, some real stress for this relationship. And I can understand why Canadians band together. Look, the United States, if attacked in any way by another country, would band together and be supportive of, you know, of our country and president. And I think in this particular case, this is a direct economic attack by the United States. And I'd love to see this thing pulled back. You know, it makes no sense on steel and aluminum to do this to Canada. All the arguments that the administration's making using 232, I think the Canadians have responded appropriately. And then when you look at the balance of trade, I mean, we've got, you know, a surplus in goods and services and in steel and in agriculture. But, you know, it looks like the president's picking a fight right now. And, you know, I understand what you're doing. I hate to see taxes go up and tariffs go up on either side of our border.
Well, just a little reminder to everybody here that a few days before the summit with Kim in Singapore, here's what the president tweeted. He said, PM Justin Trudeau of Canada acted so meek and mild during our G7 meetings, only to give a news conference after I left saying that, quote, U.S. tariffs were kind of insulting, and he, quote, will not be pushed around. Very dishonest and weak. Our tariffs are in response to his of 270% on dairy. That's what the president tweeted. My question for you is, do you think Canada should get rid of the tariffs that we have on dairy and our supply management system right now as a way to, again, open that window we talked about earlier?
So I'm against tariffs completely. And so I would love to see a reduction of friction between our two countries. But it turns out in agriculture, this is an area that these quotas and tariffs work for all countries. The U.S. has a number of agricultural products that they protect. Dairy as a long time, you know, I would say stress point between the U.S. and Canada. And trust me, Senator Schumer called me on several occasions to express his displeasure with dairy and the impact on dairy farmers in upstate New York. So would I like to see this get resolved? Yes. But it's not for me, as the former U.S. ambassador, to tell you what to do with your supply management. But on the other hand, you did at least ease some of that with TRQs, which are mechanisms to reduce this kind of tariff friction in the TPP agreement that that the U.S. was a part of at one point. And so it's not, you know, that there was a path to getting this in a better place, and the president, unfortunately, jettisoned off TPP. And so I think there's a path to making sure that this works, and probably still works for the farmers and milk producers in Canada. But there might be some compromises that are going to need to be made.
Well, I understand why you don't want to weigh in too much on that. I get that. But having said that, I'm going to push a little further if I can. Do you see, as part of that path, America reducing somewhat the subsidies it offers its agricultural players in exchange for Canada making some moves on its tariffs and supply management system?
I think that would be a bold move. And I think, you know, if I was, and not Canada, but any partner sitting on the other side, since the president stood up and he said, let's just get rid of all tariffs of all kind. And if the question is, do you want to do that and get rid of, non-tariff barriers? Do you want to get rid of all quotas? Do you want to get rid of Buy America? Do you want to get rid of subsidies to the farmers so that we can create a level playing field? I think that would be good for both of our countries, and I know Canada would compete well in that environment, as would the U.S. And so I think that would be a great proposition to sit down and say, okay, I'll take the president for what he offered. He put it on the table, and it was very clear he put it on the table, and we all have that. Let's go for it and try that path to see if we can use that as a mechanism to get rid of the steel and aluminum tariffs and then all the retaliation as well.
I know the big irritation at the moment is over trade, but if this thing continues to deteriorate, what other aspects of our joint relationship do you fear could be adversely affected if we don't figure this out?
So that's the big issue for me, because I do think we'll figure the trade stuff out. The president is looking at relationships around the world in dollars and cents terms. And the reality is relationships are based on much more than that. And, the old friend in need is a friend indeed. I'll tell you, the ferreting out of our diplomats by Ken Taylor, your ambassador in Iran at the time of the Ayatollah, the welcoming the people in Gander and all the flights being diverted. That wasn't for dollars and cents. That's because you were there with us and for us when we have disasters in the United States, natural and otherwise. And who's the first to show up? It's the Canadians. And they come in and they're so helpful in forest fires. And, when Sandy hit in the East Coast, they came in and helped put the electric lines back up. And so what happens to a relationship and a friendship? I always say if you hit somebody and hurt them, the wound will heal externally, but what is the wound in terms of how you feel about the other side of that relationship? And that's what I worry about. And I worry about not just with Canada. I mean, the entire G7 and our Pacific Alliance. The president, again, looking at things just economically, is missing this larger value of larger relationships. And look, there's going to be a time, unfortunately, that the U.S. is going to need a lot of friends in dealing with some issue that will happen around the world. And I hope the friends are there for us when the time comes.
Well, here's the logical follow-up, I think, to that question, which is the President of the United States at the moment seems to be someone who feels more kinship with authoritarian dictators around the world than he does with the democratically elected leaders that are part of the institutions that have been built up for the last 70 or 100 years. Pick whatever date you want on the calendar. Do you have, or can you share with us any insight as to why he thinks that seems to be the recipe for success? Because obviously, in a number of the NATO countries or the Western Alliance countries, we don't quite get that.
Well, it strikes me in his business relationship, he was large and in charge. Remember, this is the only political office that he's had. And, it was, my way or the highway kind of attitude that he had in his construction and building businesses and other businesses that he was in. Very similar to an authoritarian rule. And you can see his distaste for the media and how he has positioned the media and would rather have, constructed media and using it as a deliverable mouthpiece, and really is allergic to alternative thoughts. Even within his own administration, it's now become well known that you don't come in and provide alternative points of view. He wants, everybody to be in line with what he's thinking, his version of loyalty pledge. And so, that's the way he's behaving. That's what we have. And that's what we have to work with. And so you're right. I mean, he seems to be attracted to those people that can operate in that way. It's really kind of crazy.
You will not be the first person to have made that observation, Ambassador Heyman. We thank you for spending some time with us on TVO tonight. That's Bruce Heyman, the former ambassador from the United States to Canada. He is the co-founder of an organization now called Uncharted, some of which territory we seem to be in right now. Thank you, Ambassador. Good to talk to you again.
Pleasure.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.